Donnie said it came in the mail. Miles said, staring down at the game on the table under the gloomy, hanging light of our basement. I shook my head. No, that's not right. I said it might have, but I never exactly saw the postman. I just woke up this morning, and it was just there on the doorstep. The cream cardboard box of the game was the brightest thing in the dingy catacomb we called our hobby room under the house. There were 4 of us geeks, 2 with 4 eyes, Rest with 2, and for a while, the package drew each and every of our unblinking lamps. Tom rolled up his sleeves and lifted the lid of the box. There was a fire within Tom as bright as his curly flame-red locks, the type that always kept the action coming and conversation moving, a quality much desired in a group full of nerds. Nerds we were, and the bullies used any ammunition they had. Tommy was a ginger, Miles was one of the only black kids in our small southern town, I was some sickly shade of pale, Ryan had braces. There was no winning, kids were cruel. Tommy was the foreman of the Buccaneers, that's what we called our gang, often before provoking a wedgie or a head dunking in the toilet bowl. You'd catch his bobbing orange mop biking at the front of the line when we cycled to the creek, his foot being always the first to lean and check the sturdiness of creaking bridge planks before we hopped along. And God forbid when his thumbs would ever begin to twiddle. He would come up with his own mad scientist ideas to pass time, like when he got us hand fishing for eels with our wiggling thumbs. For the record, it worked. I suppose most adults would label such restless bravery as ADHD, but when you're 13 you might call him a legend, or ants in his pants McGee. The lid that was eerily printed with the board game eventually slid off the damn thing. All the tiny components of the cardboard container rattled as it plopped a few inches onto the dimly lit table. Ryan sucked his teeth and rolled his bespectacled globes. Dang it man, no instructions. Of course. Yeah, he was right. When I was 13, having no manual was a prick. There was no Googling, no internet. It's alright, I said, trying to ease their disappointed face sags. We'll make up our own rules. You're a frigging moron, Donnie. Miles chuckled. I grabbed a handful of pieces from the box. No, I'm dead serious. We'll roll the dice and decide as we go along, write rules in a notebook. Fine. Ryan pouted. I mean, what else could he say? He had biked a sweat 10 blocks, he wasn't going to head home without playing. None of them were. Most games have a board, and the game that showed up on my doorstep earlier that morning was no different. I unfolded it and laid it down. It must have taken up most of the table because I told Ryan to scooch over the legs of ham he called his chubby arms, and I rarely had to do that. I poured handfuls of bits and bobs out of the container onto the unfolded map as it emptied. There were so many pieces of different sizes, shapes and paint styles. I think we spotted the obvious immediately. In fact, we had a word for such pieces, makeshifties. That was a word we Buccaneers used to describe the board game bits that didn't belong in the box but were used to replace the originals, for example, that had trickled through the floorboards of our old treehouse or otherwise. There were cars, soldiers, people, guns. This was something we had never seen before. The board game had no theme. It was a complete mixture. Unless of course it was some sort of game where it involved city living, that was Miles' favorite. But he just wasn't impressed. I mean, I wouldn't have been either. It looked like someone had shoveled a clump from a preschooler's dinosaur and race car peppered sandbox and taken the sand. What is this shit? He scrunched his face. Quiet, Miles. Tom said hushed. Donnie's mom is upstairs, she can probably hear us, you know? Sorry, Dawn, sorry Mrs. Dawn. He waved an open hand over the table. But come on, this is a dud. Bunch of makeshifties in here. Ryan piped up, too. Yeah, Donnie. I mean, what if it was a prank, you know? Like somebody thought, you know those kids? Yeah, let's fill a box from my brother's toy box and have them figuring out how to play board game, Dumbass edition for a half hour. There was a harrowing silence as we began to realize that it was no ordinary game. The plain board, the streets and suburbs painted on the unfolded face, it must have been. Our town? Tommy abruptly spurted. It must have been hard to delicately paint all of the intricate main roads on the map upon the board. Every major detail was there, the police station, the rundown movie theater by West End, the unmistakable bear fountain dedicated to the Sudwick University Bears. Once the pieces were all sorted into piles and the board was flattened, we were finally ready to play. Maybe we would make up our own rules, after all. I was the first to go. I shook my fist and let the die fly from my hand. Plastic pieces shook and bounced upon the cardboard as the die danced before resting on the number 6. A lone red car sat upon its side against an intersection at the edge of town. None of us had touched the piece, yet it had dragged itself onto its side doors to a standstill almost of its own volition or by magnetic snap. And from that moment on, there was no going back. After the boys had all packed up and headed back up for supper, I made my way towards the flower stand at the edge of town. That day I was going to bring the girl I liked some flowers. I had given her little things before, chocolates, a bracelet I made during class. I was just a boy and far from well off. My biggest asset was my bicycle, of course. But I was a hustler. The small gifts were all I needed to work with. If only she knew she was getting scammed, all these tiny things were exchanged for her big, goofy smile worth its weight in gold. Daylight robbery, sucker. Young chap, the flower man in the suit said. He was in his 40s, yet frail, gentle, as if he handpicked these flowers. He was clean-shaven, greeting me with warmth. The antithesis of a used car salesman. And I knew why, too. When he looked down at me from his stall, he remembered what it was like to be young and in love in the summertime, and it was clear it had brushed off on him after each and every sale. "How much are these?" I asked and pointed to a colorful bouquet littered with vibrant reds and purples. I didn't know what flowers they were, but the girl probably would, and they smelled divine. "Expensive for you, kiddo." I bought them with what pocket money I had left after losing change on some taffies in the morning. I stood my cycle up and felt the air between my fingers, washing my sweat away in a cool breeze. Careless, free like the wind. No misery, no rent, no bills. Youthful, my only concerns, if Corey would like the colors of the petals or what would happen if I dropped the bouquet on the way to her. I pedaled on. It hadn't long begun to turn dark when the first one happened. I suppose to us it was the first, but there might have been more well before the Buccaneers. Perhaps long after, too. The red sedan came speeding through the road with no sign of slowing. I caught a glimpse of the driver through the windscreen. To me it looked as if the lady had been asleep at the wheel. I had been enjoying the child-exclusive privilege of biking on the footpath minding my own business when the woman narrowly snapped from her slumber and swerved from the lamppost a few paces down the street in a screaming halt. Lucky that I had been. Her brake lights covered the dimly lit road with a ruby blanket, and I could see the terrified look on her face through her rear-view mirror, an expression of someone that just brushed death. I pedaled up beside her window. It took her a while before she even turned to face me. Her head was as stiffly frozen solid as her fingers which had clawed around the steering wheel. "Oh, hello Donnie." Her aged voice was shaken. I leaned in to get a closer look at her face. "Mrs. Landry?" It was the unmistakable face from the corner gas station, the kind old so Lester Landry. "Yes, sorry Donnie, I must have given you a real fright." She let her shoe slide off the brake with a thud. "Golly, I was probably going more miles per hour on the dash than numbers in my age." "No," I contested, "I'd say you were going a lot faster than 21. She let out one exhausted laugh. "Are you sure that you're okay? Do you need me to call someone for you?" No, I think I'll be alright, honey. Must have dozed off, but I'm wide awake now." What a rude awakening that was. I told her to drive safely, gave her a wave and I was off again. We were side by side for a while as she began to accelerate. It was a sluggish pace, but as fast as my bike would go. You would never catch me calling my bicycle slow back then though. That baby was a racehorse as far as my friends were concerned. Faster than Ryan's hunk of metal. Definitely quicker than Tom's. After a few moments I started to think she wanted to yell at me through her window like the grown-ups always seem to do. She was going to pull up slowly before shouting something like, "Hey man, your lights are off." Or "Watch where you're going dumbass," but those words never came. What she did say sent a chill through my spine. "Something is grabbing my car, Donnie," she shrieked. "Oh, God. Not by golly, not by gosh. Oh God. It's not going forward," she shouted. "I'm not going forward." Her front two tires screamed gravel into the air as she shot me a horrified grimace. She bent her neck around, nothing was at the rear but the empty road. As she fumbled with fedoras and locks, they didn't budge for poor Mrs. Landry. "Do something, please," she screamed. We were helpless. I leaned in to pull her from the driver's seat, but the thick seatbelt wouldn't yield, and inch by inch the sedan began to groan as it was yanked backwards against the cement like a heavy cinder block. Before long, her gray hair was just a blur as the car jerked backward out of arm's reach, her voice fading with the setting daylight that had cast pine shadows across the road as stretched arms. It all happened at once. If I could have done something, I would have. The sedan dove sideways against a lamppost like a heavy magnet, shards of glass clattering against the cement like the devil's hail. Flowers of growing flames blossomed from somewhere underneath the bonnet, pollinating the leather interior with a scorching heat that left a sour odor of burning skin and bone. I was sprinting towards the wreck as fast as I could, but my sneakers came to a skidding halt when I realized it was too late. Grandma Landry was crawling out of the broken mouth in the windscreen. She looked up at me, trying to say something, trying to beg for help. When you're 13, you're not meant to see a face sliding off bone. Such a lovely face reduced to hot bubble gum on blistering pavement, flowing and sticky all at once. You're not meant to see someone's lights fade away. I often look back at the night I pedaled away from my crash-landed innocence. Longing for that night. It was there, then it wasn't. It was a passing summer breeze, a cold-sided pillow to the cheek on a humid evening. Once there, then never more. Chasing the low-hanging lamp in the caramel sky, I never once looked back at Mrs. Landry or her mangled face or the burning car. Because that night, my bike really was a racehorse, and my screams, they were her reins. I met up with Corey soon after what happened. She immediately knew something was wrong, the light in my eyes was no more, and it wasn't just the falling sun. We convened in the lavender field by Marl's Grove as we usually did. The beautiful girl with the boy's name was laying in the tall grass admiring the darkening sky and fresh air, watching the stars begin to take shape. I sat beside her and opened my backpack. "I got you these," I said. Her eyes beamed at me, then the flowers, and her gleaming smile could have lit a candle. She took them in one hand, the other hand on her heart. "Ugh," she groaned before lying flat again. "I can't take these home, you know. Mom will kill me." "I know," I replied. "So, enjoy them just for the moment. Before they're gone." Corey turned her head on her backpack. She shot me a glance over her freckle-specked cheeks. "What's the matter?" she asked. I was pulling leaves of grass out of the soil. There was a car accident on my way. She swung upright. "Oh my gosh, Donnie, are you alright?" "Yes," I muttered. "But..." The grass popped as I pulled. The flames and the lady's car still danced in my eyes. "I think I saw somebody die." Her arms wrapped around me, brunette curtains of hair draped over my eyes. Corey made me feel warm, she made me feel safe. "Did you call somebody?" Her voice was near my ear. "No, I saw a few policemen that were heading that way." Tears finally came, glistening like sunlight through crystal as they streamed down my cheek and onto Corey's jumper. My voice was quiet, reluctant. "There's something wrong with this town." I didn't want to tell her that something had grabbed Mrs. Landry's car. She held my shoulders close, and we both vacantly gazed into the wilting flower petals that were in her hand. Morning came, and it was chaos and commotion inside Ryan's lounge. The rest of the Buccaneers were sitting around, too, staring at the carpet as Ryan's mom zipped by with boxes in her hands yelling at him. "Corey told us about the car accident you passed, Donnie. Glad you're alright," Miles said, and Tom nodded with tight lips. "I'm alright, thanks guys. I tried my best to act cool, holding the waterworks. But, what's going on here?" I whispered to Tom. He shook his head. "Take a seat." Miles leaned in. "Ryan took the game home last night and his mom found it." I shot him a puzzled look. What's wrong with that? I thought. Ryan's parents were devout Christians, but not enough to warrant throwing a game away because of any suggestive themes. "You're living with your father for now, Ryan Mosey. I won't stand for any more of this voodoo talk." Miles, Tom and I shared wide-eyed glances. "Mom, please," Ryan begged a whiny yelp. It's not like that, listen to the box for yourself. No. She abruptly boomed. I've burned it out back while you dozed off. Now pack your bags. For a while, the boys and I sat awkwardly still as we watched the two rushing around their house with various belongings in hand. Ryan collapsed onto the couch beside us, defeated, with his head in his hands. I shouldn't have said anything at all. He mumbled with a mouthful of palm. What happened? I asked. It's just awful, Donnie. I told them that I heard a man speaking inside of the box lid. They think I'm mad because I told the truth. Now Mom has gone all wacky on me, man. Tom grabbed his bag and made for the door. Sounds like you need to get some fresh air, you comin'? Ryan bent his head around the corner to see if his mom was watching before slipping on her shoes. Outside, we climbed the stairs to the treehouse that Ryan's father had shoddily put him together before his mom went wacky on him, too. He took a while to climb. I'm surprised one of the ladder rungs didn't snap, but Miles helped him get up in the end. I was the last one into the treehouse. It was there. In the center of all the planks was the musty board game that Ryan's mom said she had burned to a crisp. In fact, it was unfolded, pieces aside, beckoning to be played. The silence in the room was palpable. All eyes were on me, then to the maroon car on the board. My friends must have felt it too, that deep unease and queasiness. Nobody had the stones to say it, but I knew what they were thinking. It's a red sedan, someone said. I was muttering, overwhelmed with flooding emotion. The door to the waterworks finally unbolted. I'm the one that rolled the die yesterday. I mean, maybe it is voodoo, maybe I killed someone, Miles gripped my shoulders tight from behind. Donnie, no, he cleared his throat. You almost saved someone. I glared up with him with wet globes. What? His finger drifted along the roads of the cardboard. Don't you see? He said. This means something. Why else would the board be a map? When we roll the dice, it must be showing the future. This thing right here? It told you that there was going to be a car crash. Tom and Ryan tried to calm me down, but their eyes told me they were scared shitless. We can stop things from happening before it's too late, Miles affirmed. His grin was warm and reassuring, and for a while I thought about all the people that we could save. But the more I pondered, the more unsettling the thought became. I remembered the old woman saying something pulled her car. It was no accident. My heart was racing, my hands beating with sweat. I opened my mouth to tell them the truth, but it was too late. I wanted to say something, but Ryan was already chucking around the black and white soothsaying cube and two clasped hands. We all held our breath and watched. The dice roll. www.reddit.com web link.